Welcome back to Behind Enemy Lines. Terry and Mike here. So we have a great guest tonight, Dr. Eric Wallace. He's a man that I met actually when I first, very early on, got into politics. I went to one of his conferences on the southwest side, which is where I grew up, not far from where Dr. Wallace lives. And he's actually a pastor. He also is the founder and president of Freedom Journal Institute, which is a study of faith and public policy. He's also an author. So he wrote the book, The Heart of Apostasy. The Heart of Apostasy. I think I'm saying that right.
You got it.
Yeah. And then he has a documentary that's in flight right now, Black Families Matter, and we're going to talk about a lot of the policies and the things that affected the African American community. A lot of it came from our friends from the left in the 1960s. There's his book. You could find it on Amazon. And before we have Doc jump on here, we got a little mini trailer of his documentary that's in process right now. We just want to share that with you. It's only a couple minutes, and then we're going to pull Dr. Wallace on.
I'm going to apologize in advance if I clipped the first couple seconds off this trailer. I had difficulty downloading it, so this may be missing about the first second or so, but here we go.
Moynihan was warning that the current social welfare programs were accentuating a fatherless home crisis at 24%. That these benefits can only be given if there's not an Moynihan
So I just restarted it.
That the current social welfare programs were accentuating a fatherless home crisis at 24%. That these benefits can only be given if there's not an adult male living in the home.
We have to reject worldliness. We must have a Christian worldview. What is God's design? That's in Genesis.
All of this money was now invested in creating an industry to serve the poor. And that's when the out of wedlock births are separated. There are 4 elements to what happened.
A consequence of us moving away from a theological foundation in the truth of God's word, which comes from the pulpit and should be safeguarded by the pulpit, is that we've now shifted from biblical justice to social justice.
I'll give you a statistic here. The Pew Research Center actually did a survey in 2019. The United States has the largest percentage of kids that grow up without a father than any country in the world, ×3.
No other group's family story starts in chattel slavery. And while I disagree with some of my colleagues on the left who would say that slavery destroyed the black family, my conclusion is that slavery deformed the black family.
The reason that I did not pursue divorce, did not want to get divorced, is because this is the person who God has sent for me. And there are going to be tough times, but in divorce, who wins? Nobody.
And that becomes the challenge when you give a vow. I don't get to determine what better or for worse means. I don't get to determine what sickness and in health means. And the challenge is we only want the better part. We only want the good health part. Well, then that ain't love.
If we really want to strengthen the black community, the most important thing we could do is launch a national initiative to strengthen the black family. Strengthen marriage and strengthen children being born within marriage.
It's very it looks you're off to a good start there, Doc.
Yeah.
And we talked a little bit before you jumped on the show. I mean, about Charlie Kirk, and I mean, this is the same thing that he's trying to do, across the globe, actually in the United States. And I think it's so important. I mean, for the African American community, but even all communities, right? I mean, it's just like happened when we were younger. They just kind of moved away from the church and the nucleus family, and even like eating dinner together, the family, the kids move away, and all that stuff has just progressively got worse in years. So anyway, I gave you a little brief introduction. Why don't you give the audience a little bit more detailed introduction about yourself and maybe your book, and then we'll jump into some of the topics that are important to you.
One of the things I have to, well, thank you, Terry, for inviting me and having me on and playing the video. What I do need to say before I say anything else is that actually I'm the co-founder of Freedom's Journal Institute. My wife is the other.
Okay, sorry about that.
No, that's okay. That's okay. I have to correct that, or else I'll be in trouble.
Right. Yeah, you don't want to be sleeping on the couch tonight. I understand.
So we work together, and actually, Black Families Matter is an initiative that actually comes under her. And so this video is kind of getting ready to launch Black Families Matter. She'll come up later. As you saw, neither one of us were in the trailer because it's not really about us. It's about trying to get some of the people who are kind of experts in this area. Matter of fact, the first person you saw on there was Kendall Qualls out of Minnesota. He's actually running for governor in Minnesota. And he's got his own nonprofit called Take Charge. The next one is Bishop Vincent. So the names aren't on there. So we've got our guy now putting people's names on there, because one of our consultants that's helping us with this said, you need to put people's names on there, because you got some heavy hitters like Bob Woodson.
Delano.
I don't know how many people know who Bob Woodson is. So unless you throw his name up there, some folks may have heard of him but don't know him. Delano Squires was the one who talked about that slavery deformed the Black family. He's a research not research assistant. He's a researcher at Heritage Foundation. So people know Heritage, but they may not know Delano. And the last one who was about having a national movement for the Black family was Ian Rowe, who's a senior fellow at American Enterprise Institute. So these are some people that we had an A-list, and some of our A-listers. We still have some more people we want to get and put on and interview. But we're trying to get this out by spring of next year. So I know you asked me about me, and I diverted to talk about others. But so we've been doing Freedom's Journal Institute since 2000. Well, we've been doing the Institute since 2011. We started out as a magazine in 2008, and actually Freedom's Journal is the name of the first Black newspaper.
Really? Okay, that's cool.
Yeah, and that's why we kind of, because it's kind of redundant. You say Freedom's Journal magazine, but we like the name Freedom's Journal. We wanted to be connected with history. It was started in 1827 by free Blacks in the North in New York, and so one of the things they said was they were tired of others speaking for them, and they wanted to speak for themselves. Now, the paper only lasted 2 years, but it was the first one. And it kind of resonated with me, because I felt as a Black conservative, people were trying to speak for us.
Right.
So, it was always the Black liberals, as if they spoke for every Black person everywhere. They're like, no, they don't.
Yeah. I have oh geez, my dad. Sorry, I got a question for you. When I was watching the trailer back, sorry, it's my father was calling here. The one gentleman said, mentioned about slavery destroyed the African American family, which obviously it did. But then, like, as I was looking at these numbers in 1960s, if I was correct, was African American out of wedlock and the families was the percentage better for African Americans than white families, I think, back then, wasn't it?
Yeah, in the 40s, I think it was 80% of Black children would be born to two-parent households. But let me correct you on something you just said. So he was saying that his colleagues felt like slavery had destroyed the Black family. He said it deformed the Black family. People argue right now, like Bob Woodson and some of those folks we interviewed will say that even though slave master tried to destroy Black families, a lot of Black families were resilient. And matter
Yeah.
of fact, black marriage there were more couples together even during slavery than there are right now.
Wow.
And so
Yeah.
our argument, so this is our argument for the film. The argument for the film, the reason we're doing it is because people want to use slavery and Jim Crow to say it destroyed the black family. It disintegrated the black family. We argue, no, that's not correct. The black family was very resilient. And Bob Woodson says when white people were at their worst, black people were at their best. And
Yes.
so those families, hung together. It wasn't until the federal government decided they were going to interfere and then end up giving black women money for having children out of wedlock. So for every
Yes.
child you had, you got an extra paycheck, and that's going on right now.
Yeah.
And the marriage rate among black people is it's below 30. It's below. Let me use it this way. It's below 40%. So I think it's around like 35%, 36%. And
Yes.
so it's crazy. We need to turn that around.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's the perverse incentives that came in from all these so-called welfare reforms, exactly like you said. Now all of a sudden you're incentivizing bad behavior. You're paying people for out of wedlock births. You're designing a system that did destroy the family. And to your point, yeah, you had much higher rates of marriage. You had higher levels of church attendance, but it's been this destructive, this creep of liberalism into the church, into the family, that has really targeted and destroyed blacks and other minorities. And I mean, it's disgusting. This whole policy should be reversed. But yeah, your Delano Squires, he's great. He's been a contributor at the Blaze for a while. And I think he's a brilliant guy that really understands the problem, beginning to end. And from a historical context, he's also good at explaining it in a way that everybody, it makes it easy to understand. Because that's one of the issues with some of these experts is they have difficulty making things digestible for the average person.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So what are it's probably a difficult question to answer, but as you look at this, right?
Mhm.
What are some of the things that you're looking at to try to fix this problem? It's a massive problem, right? It's gonna first of all, the government's gonna keep interfering with it, and how do you stop that, right? When they're
Yeah.
incentivized to not get married. So I mean, I think that has to be fixed in some way, right? Before you
Well, well, one of the things we came up with in Freedom's Journal is what we call the RISE principles, which stands for responsible government, individual liberty and fidelity, strong family values, and economic empowerment. And so we want to take those, and so the first one is responsible government. Let's have a government that incentivizes marriage instead of penalizes it, right? Or incentivizes some of the bad behavior that Mike was just talking about. So uh, getting rid of some of the programs, and I don't mean hacking them tomorrow, because there's some
Yeah.
people who are living off of those. So we have to find ways to wean them off
Yeah.
those programs and start, incentivizing
Mhm.
getting married, because it's in our best interest. I mean, a lot of the crap that goes on, and I should say, put a pin right there. It's happening in not just in minority communities; it's happening in the white
Yes.
community.
everywhere.
Yeah.
So anybody who gets caught in the quote safety net that ends up becoming a hammock that people end up living in, it's terrible for them, because God created us. If you believe that God created human beings in His likeness, then He has certain responsibility. He's expecting certain things for us to do, and it's like a child who you want to learn to walk. If you carry that child every place you go, there's going to be arrested development in that child, because you
Yeah.
won't allow that child to stand on his own 2 feet and even fall down, because he knows he's not going to fall down and get back up. You can't protect people from bad decisions. You got to let them make their bad decisions, and you got to
Yep.
let them grow to be responsible. So government has to get out of the way and stop trying to play God in people's lives. Number one, and then there's the I is individual liberty and fidelity. We need to allow people to have agency to do, to make decisions. I mean, I was going to say school choice fits in there, but that fits more into the S with strong family values. But it allows people to make decisions, and in that decision-making process, the fidelity part is you need to have something that you believe in. For me as a Christian, I believe in the Lord Jesus Christ. And that there is a God, that He created the world, and He has some rules and expectations of us as individuals.
Yeah.
And I don't care. I mean, as a Christian, obviously, I'm promoting Christianity, but even those who are firm believers in Judaism or Muslims or whatever, they have a certain standards they try and live up to. And then strong family values. It's that's where education begins in the home. Therefore, you should allow parents to send their child wherever they want to send their child, or keep them at home and homeschool them. Intergenerational dependence. Grandparents, aunts, uncles. The whole family deal is important. And then lastly, and there's more under those. I'm trying to just give you the bullet points. And then economic empowerment, how to create wealth, right? Buying homes, leaving money for your children and your children's children, trying to build something that'll last, giving people a skill. I mean, we're so busy, giving people money instead of helping to promote a skill set. The left is so interested in raising people's the amount of money they work for the same skill set, right? They don't learn anymore. They just want you to get more money. And what they do is they end up pricing people, and you guys know this. They end up pricing people out of the marketplace, because if you don't have the skills, they're not going to pay you. If you have absolutely zero skills, nobody's going to pay you $20 an hour to do something that and that was generally an entrance for like teenagers. Get them off the street, get their foot in the door, let them understand what it means to work for a living and get a paycheck, and to have to be on time, and to actually you have to wear the uniform or whatever it is you're doing. And we've lost that, and that's why we have a lot of criminals out on the street, especially young criminals.
Yeah. I even like I'm 64 years old, and I see, like, from the Italian
Man,
side.
you're old.
I know. Lucky I'm alive. And so, like, from the Italian side, we grew up in the Southwest side, and the Italian side, my mom's side of the family, and we all live by each other, grandmas. We would go, and like, none of that happens now. It's like it's a generational thing that's like this shifting away, from all Americans, right? And I miss that. I miss, being with my cousins and my grandma. I mean, obviously people are passing, but it just stopped at that generation. It seems like, right? It just stopped, and it's something I think that needs to be applied to all different generations, and the family nucleus, the nucleus family, and the rest of the family. And I'm just rambling here, but I miss it.
Well, Terry, you're onto something though. If you believe that the powers that be, we're moving towards socialism / communism, and one of the things in communism is destroy the natural family, the traditional family.
I guess
They
so.
want the state to be your family. So
Yeah.
it makes sense that a lot of that stuff is going away, because they're teaching that in our schools. In fact, the schools want to take, as you know, man, you're one of those fighters who are standing up for parents' parental rights in the schools, that they want to take away all your rights. They want to be able to tell your kid you can go get an abortion without telling your parents.
Yeah, it's I'm glad you brought that up. Like, Stava Murray was trying to get that bill passed where if a parent didn't allow their child to have gender affirming care, they could take your child away from you, which is absurd. And then, like, my kids are at Downers Grove South, where all this craziness started for me, right? And they're allowed to give, if my son or daughter wanted to change their genders and talk to them about that, they want to get the pornographic books, they could do that. But if I had to send them to school with some medicine or aspirin, I got to write a note and stuff, and bring the note there, but then they're going to go and change my kid's gender without even telling me.
Right.
Look at Colorado right now. They're finding parents that won't use their kids' preferred pronouns or new made-up name $50,000. And, this is going to spread to other states. There's already other states talking about implementing certain things, because they know, again, it'll cripple the household. There's no way they can fight back. You have forced compliance with insanity because of the financial penalties associated with it.
Yeah, I had.
That's where.
Go ahead, Doc.
Go ahead.
Yeah,
no, I was just going to say that's where people have to just stand up and say no. I'm not paying, get out in the streets, do all the stuff actually that the left is trying to tell their people to do, right?
Yeah.
Get out and protest. And it's time for us sometimes to get out and protest and block traffic and
Yes.
march down to City Hall and say, we're not going to have any of this. This will be your last time in office. And if you don't, matter of fact, you probably need to step down right now because we're not,
Yeah.
I learned firsthand with the school and the porn stuff, right? I couldn't get fathers to help support me, right? I made those posters that, that I had held, and the dads were scared to come and support. I go, if you're not going to defend your own child, people talk about, oh, we got guns, war, you guys are screwed. I can't get dads to come and just say, hey, porn doesn't belong in my child's school. I can't
Right.
get them to come. And it's like, it's frustrating. It's, first of all, we shouldn't be embarrassed of it. It doesn't mean we hate gay people. It doesn't mean we're not going to be
Right.
including kids and all that stuff. It's all lies, to your point. It's everything they're lying. This is Marxist separation between the parents and their children and demonizing us for simply saying
Yep.
we don't want porn in our kids' school. That's it. They're children. If they're a gay child, they're still a child. They're just like my children were children. And because they're gay or whatever, that doesn't mean that they have to see porn to feel included. That doesn't mean if they don't see porn, they're going to commit suicide. So it's on our shoulders, because my children don't have to see it, heterosexual porn. They don't walk around like, oh, Dad, if I don't see a BJ picture, I'm not going to feel like I'm part of the guys. It's absurd. It's absurd that we even are
It
talking
is. It is.
about this.
Yeah. And those are, like I said, these are some of the things that our friend Charlie Kirk was debating,
Yeah.
and matter of fact, it's one of the things he was debating when he talked about the civil rights legislation. Felt it went too far, and that it's been misused now for transgenderism and other things that are being pushed down our throat. And he was absolutely correct.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, part of the reason why the black community actually votes Democrat Party is because shoot, his name now escapes me. He ran for office. He ran for president. I see his face, but can't think of his name.
Wallace.
No. Republican.
Oh.
Now, tongue
Yeah,
to my
see?
tongue.
See?
Give me a second. Ronald Reagan, before that, did a speech for him to launch his campaign. The
Yep,
time for choosing
exactly.
speech.
Hang on, I'm looking
Yes.
this up.
That's exactly who I'm talking about. Because he felt like so I'll keep talking while you're looking it up. So he felt like the federal legislation went too far, that it was trying to tell people who you had to serve, and that
Barry
the government
Goldwater.
had no Barry Goldwater, yes. That you shouldn't, the federal government should not be involved as to who you should serve. In fact, it should be a local issue. So if people wanted to protest, they could protest. If somebody wanted to open a store across the street from you and serve everybody, and because you decided you're only going to serve a certain group of people, they should be able to do that. But the federal government shouldn't be involved in that. And I wholeheartedly agree, because all of a sudden it gave the federal government too much power then to come in and dictate the private citizens and the people who business owners, who
Yeah.
they and it's going on now. So saying, you have to hire this person, you can't discriminate at all. And life is full of discriminating. We discriminate about who we're going to date, who we're not going to date. We discriminate where we're going to live and where we're not going to. There's
Yeah.
very different reasons why we pick what we pick.
Yeah.
And go ahead.
Are you familiar with Walter Williams? Used to be a fill-in host for Rush Limbaugh, economist, brilliant guy. Yeah, he talked about this all the time, and specifically with dating, and that he knew he wanted to marry a black woman, so he discriminated against whites and Asians and other people that were on campus because he wasn't interested in marrying any of them. He was interested in marrying a black woman, and all of us do this in different aspects of our life. It isn't a bad thing until it's used in a way to discriminate against an entire class of people for things that everybody should have a right to or be entitled to. Things like anything with to do with the federal government or the ability to go mail a letter, just things like that. But it's been turned into it's been twisted from something that's normal to something that now has one particular meaning, and everybody shies away from it.
Yeah, I used this. I saw Charlie doing it this week on some of his old tapes, but I used the analogy before too about basketball, right, with quotas and stuff. And I do understand back in the day that there was help that was required because there was a lot of crazy stuff going on. But now things have changed, and then it's funny when you have a leftist talking about the importance of quota, especially a white leftist, right? And then you ask them about the basketball. Well, okay, well, the African Americans make up what, like 14% of the population. Let's make 14% of the basketball team black. Oh, they come up with some crazy reason why, they come up with some just crazy excuses to why that doesn't count for basketball. You can't selectively choose quotas when they're beneficial to your political flight, and it's just ridiculous and absurd, like most of what these guys do and talk about and
Well, it's
push.
turned harmful on our college campuses too. These idea of quotas and strict numbers now means they're discriminating against like Asian and Indian students that want to apply, especially like Ivy League, high-end colleges. It's also harming a lot of the black students that apply there because they've changed its grading criteria on entrance exams. So you're getting the acceptable percentage of people into the school, but the issue is you're by artificially boosting some of their GPAs and grades up. Once they get a year or two into a program, they're forced to drop out. They can't. And again, it's not to say that these are stupid people or anything else, but they would have been better served maybe going to a different school where they would have finished their law degree or whatever. Because I don't know if it still is, but it used to be an especially difficult program for a reason. It was for the very best of the best. And when you're giving somebody an artificial leg up to get in, that means some people may get through it, but a lot of people then they just don't have what it takes. Whereas if they had gone to another, a good state school or a different school, they would have been fine. They would have gotten into a career, been highly successful and everything else. And they end up just saddled with debt. It ends up being highly destructive.
Yeah. It's no different than when you have, females that are getting into the military, the fire department or police department, and they lower the standards for females so if it's something that requires, you get to be physically strong, it doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman. If you don't meet that minimal requirement, you're putting other people at risk, right? It doesn't matter, so and then they want us to lower standards just because of political correctness, which is absurd. It puts everybody at risk. Doctors, even the state of Illinois, and they're trying to lower the standards for the education grading and stuff. And my children, my twins, both honor students because of my wife, not because of me. and I think senior year, my son got 80 something on a test, and he got a chance to retake it if he wanted. I'm like, what the hell is that? I'm like, because he wanted to keep his grade. He got to take the test again, and he got a 90 something, which goes towards his grade. I'm like, he shouldn't be able to. You know what I mean? It's like, I was just kind of like, holy cow. And then the lowest they could get in their school is a 40. So if you don't take the test, you get a 40. If you get caught cheating, you get a 40. If I would have had that when I was in high school, I would have had a better grade point average. I would have had
Well, the interesting thing is that what they don't account for is, this whole idea is if you're 14%, I think it's like 13% of the population blacks are. And I've heard other pastors, actually conservative pastors, say, it's been at 13% for a long time, while the Hispanic population is actually outgrowing the black population. And it's because we're not having babies. I mean,
it's
not
abortion.
getting married, not having babies, aborting a lot of the babies. And so it's an issue. But to the sports analogies, I was going to say that basketball and football, where there's predominantly predominant number of blacks who play those sports, and people act as though, well, it wouldn't be any good if the blacks weren't there. I'm like, no, it's not like white people can't play basketball. I mean, we're importing all kinds of people from Europe that can actually play basketball. It's our focus, right? It's the culture. So if you look at the black population, we got more people in sports and entertainment that are making it and becoming rich, and we don't have as many doctors or there aren't that many Ben Carsons around.
It's
not that
the
we can't
environment.
do it.
Yeah.
It's what you consider to be important in life. So for me in my house, I've had a mother that had a PhD in psychology. My dad had a master's degree, and he had wanted to do a PhD but never got the opportunity. So I was the only one. Now this is funny. So I grew up in a house. I had two brothers, one older, one younger, and we grew up in a house where our parents are well educated, right? Neither one of them went to finish college. I was the only one to finish college, and then I felt like, well, the onus is on me. If anyone's gonna continue the tradition of getting a PhD in the house, I have to do it. So, so I ended up getting my bachelor's degree in biblical studies. I was going to Howard University first. Then I felt a call to ministry, and then went to a Bible college that my pastor told me about. It turned out I did well in Hebrew and Greek, and so I went further and got a master's degree. And when I was in my master's study, one of my professors challenged me to get a PhD. He said, "Man, you wrote a really good paper. I think you should think about getting a PhD. There aren't that many blacks with PhDs in biblical studies." And so I took that as a challenge and eventually got my PhD. Now there's a longer road, and actually I mentioned a little bit of it in my book, because the book is based on a paper that I wrote from my PhD program. I actually flunked in one of my exams for the PhD. And I thought I put it in there, you need to eat humble pie sometimes. And so, but it ended up, so it was like 25 years ago, I wrote this paper and turned it in. And now that paper ended up becoming the foundation of the book that I just wrote. So I guess that's a good segue into the book. If you want,
How many years of college did you have? Roughly.
What do you mean, undergraduate or
altogether, like in college?
Oh, altogether. So it was about 5 years for the bachelor's degree, because when I left Howard to go to Washington Bible College, they didn't accept all of my credits. So, and then 2 years for the first master's degree. So Master of Arts in Biblical Studies, Old Testament emphasis. And then I got a Master's of Theology in Hebrew Bible. And then from there, I got a PhD in New Testament, where I focused, my dissertation was on the Gospel of John. How the gospel writer in John actually used the Old Testament, how he used the Pentateuch to talk about the advent of Jesus.
Oh, interesting.
So I don't know how I stopped adding up. I'm sorry. So 1 year for Master's of Theology, and then like 5 years for the PhD. So I don't know. I didn't do the math. I didn't add it all up. But
so I only have a bachelor's degree, but I think I had as many years in college as you. I had 12 at Moraine Valley, 12 at Moraine Valley, and 2 at Elmhurst. I always use that joke. I didn't go 12 straight. But that's my joke. I did go on and off for a long time. I started at Elmhurst at 35 when I finally started growing up, and I hit 126 credits from junior college and other schools when I started the night program. But why don't we jump into your book now?
Yeah. So the book, The Heart of Apostasy. So again, the title is okay, you put it up there. Good. The Heart of Apostasy: How the Black Church Abandoned Biblical Authority for Political Ideology and How to Reclaim It. So some time ago, after I finished my PhD, actually, I started looking out of the world, trying to figure out what am I going to do with my life. And I saw what was it, the Republican convention? I think it was Bush, and I think it was his second term. And I saw him get teary-eyed looking at talking about a soldier who had been someone in the military, and I forgot what had happened. All I saw, he teared up a little bit, and it was the first time I kind of watched a political event like that before in my life. And then I was like, I don't understand how my colleagues in the ministry don't don't have any kind of affinity for the Republican Party. They seem to all, vote the Democrat Party. And then I saw an article in the Tribune talking about how Jesse Jackson and some others had met, and I can't remember exactly where it was. I think it was someplace in Tennessee or something, trying to figure out how they could affect the next election for the Democrats, so the Democrats would win. And I just didn't get it, because once I started looking at the platform for the Republican Party versus the platform for the Democrat Party, I said, biblically speaking, the Republican platform mirrors more of what I thought it meant to be a Christian, right? The things we need to follow. So when it comes to abortion, when it comes to the traditional family, when it comes to education, when it comes to of course, we weren't having conversations about transgenderism back then.
Right.
But it's just a lot of things that I saw I didn't like in the Democrat Party. And so, I started getting involved in that. And then eventually I ended up started getting involved in politics itself, and actually ran for office a few times. And then got involved. I actually started the African American Republican Council in Illinois. That only lasted a couple of years, though, because, as you know, Illinois politics is cutthroat. So, so I ended up running for. Actually, I started running for lieutenant governor, to be quite honest. I didn't know anything, and it was one of those years where Jim Edgar was thinking about running again for governor. People were trying to get Jim Edgar to come back and run again, and so everything stopped. Everything stopped because everybody knew if Edgar got in, it was a no-brainer. Everybody was going to get out, right? So, so while that was happening, somebody came to me and said, "Hey, you should probably run for state senate." And I said, "Cool, I'll do that." Because it's a much smaller area and I don't have to run around the whole state. So I'm sorry, this is a long way to get there, but that's how I kind of got into politics, and then trying to understand why the Black community, like 90%, continues to vote for the Democrat Party, and they don't necessarily agree with the stances of the Democrat Party. So I felt like I need to do something about it. I said, I've got letters in front of my name, I got letters behind my name, and some of those letters will help open up doors that other people may not be able to walk through. And so in 2008, I found the name Freedom Journal, and we started Freedom Journal magazine. And the idea was to aggregate a number of the Black conservative voices to speak to the Black community and to let those Black conservatives know that are out there that they're not alone, right? Sometimes we feel very lonely that there aren't people out there who can identify with who we are and what we believe, right? Especially in the Christian community. So
and there seems to be like, sorry to interrupt. I was just going to say, and it seems like there's way more pushback. I have a neighbor here in my neighborhood, Black gentleman. He's probably around, he just retired, but he has 20 years in the Navy and then a little over 20 years as a college professor. But when he told his family originally in 2016 that he was going to vote for Trump because he thought Hillary Clinton was evil, and he had been a lifelong Democrat, he said, half his family disowned him. Now, like his daughter wouldn't talk to him. A couple other people just, pretended he didn't exist. Now, since then, they came around after seeing, what happened during the Biden years and the persecution and everything else. But he said he's still got relatives that just think he's evil incarnate now, basically. But, luckily he said it's cousins and people he didn't really care about now. But yeah, it's a whole different level of pushback. They act like you're, betraying the entire race of people if you step across party lines.
Right. So there's one thing I did want to correct that I just saw on the screen. It says Freedom's Journal. That should be an I. It looks like it's a T.
Oh, let me look real quick. That if it is, I'll fix it. Sorry, I copy pasted all this stuff.
No, I may have sent it to you wrong. I mean, you said, you copy and pasted. It may be my fault.
You typed it wrong.
But anyway, so I forgot to mention. So as I'm moving along, my heart is, how do I reach the Black Christian community and get them to change their mind about how they're voting? How does so I got an example. I got in an argument with a guy. We were emailing back and forth, and I used to work with him at this particular church. His dad was the pastor, but we had served on a committee actually to put together some training for their ministers. And there was a question about, well, he challenged me. He said, we're not one issue voters. And I think he was thinking more about the abortion issue.
Mhm.
And I wrote him back. I said, oh, yes, we are. Our one issue is, how does our vote glorify our Lord and Savior? And I don't remember how he retorted or whether he even said anything, but that's how I look at it. It's,
Yeah.
we represent Christ here on the earth. I don't think the Lord, especially now, is for transgenderism, for mutilating kids and lying to them and thinking somehow that they can change their gender, and by just changing their pronouns. And you know, how many genders, you know, how many genders are there? How many genders did God create in Genesis? Because when they do surgery, right, it's either moving someone who's a male to a female or a female to male. I don't know about a third or a fourth or a fifth of anything. So
Yeah.
so I mean, it's ludicrous. It is.
Yeah, it's crazy. It makes no sense.
It makes no sense. And so I decided that I needed to write. So I got to go back to seminary. So working on my PhD, I end up flunking one of my exams. So they give you 5 exams you have to do in 2 weeks. You got time to study for it, but once you say yes, I'm ready, boom, you get hit, and you hit hard. And I flunked one of them, to my surprise. There was a question on there I wasn't prepared for, and I kind of tried to fluff my way through it, but they saw through my answer. So it was on the Synoptic Gospels. So the Synoptic Gospels are Matthew, Mark, and Luke. John is something separate. And of course, I'm writing my dissertation on John, so I was ready for the John question. I wasn't ready for the Matthew, the question they asked me about Matthew, Mark, Luke. And so what they made me do was write a paper on the Gospel of Luke. And at the time, I was a single father. I had my kids with me in seminary, and they were young. Well, they weren't toddlers or anything. They were in grammar school. And it just wasn't something I wanted to do at that time. I mean, I had enough on my plate. But it turned out to be one of the best things that ever happened to me, because I all of a sudden applied myself to the Gospel of Luke, and I started to understand it a lot better. And one of the themes was promise and fulfillment. And so this paper that I did ended up opening up, and I mentioned this actually in the book, that it opened up the gospel to me in a way I would have never have understood unless I had to do that paper. And I've used that as I've been involved in ministry. I've pastored in the past. I'm not pastoring now, but I was ordained as a pastor, and I've pastored in a couple of different places. And I've actually preached through the Gospel of Luke because of writing that paper. And it finally occurred to me when I got to the parable of the sower. I used the parable of the sower. If you know the story, that the parables that Jesus teaches, not only in Luke but also in Matthew, but in Luke. So there are differences in the Gospels. So I argue that in Luke writes to Theophilus. People have tried to argue who is Theophilus, and to that community. And I think Luke is one of his major themes is promise and fulfillment. That some of the things that God has promised in the past, he is now bringing to fruition now through promises made to Abraham, to David. Jesus is the son of David who will rule forever, and his kingdom will be forever, that kind of thing. With the angels coming, Angel Gabriel coming to Zechariah while he's ministering in the temple. He tells him, hey, you're going to have you and your wife are going to have a baby. His name's going to be John. And that happens. Of course, there's a longer story about that, which I talk about in the book. Then he goes to Mary and tells Mary, you're going to have a child. And these things start coming to fruition. So he's trying to tell everybody, look, God is the keeper of his promises. And he's saying this in the midst of what we consider delay. Jesus has said he will come back. And Luke is the only synoptic gospel, is the only gospel that mentions his ascension at the end of the Gospel of Luke, and he mentions it again in the book of Acts. So he's trying to tell everybody. So he kind of writes his gospel with the idea there's this delay between the advent of Jesus and his ascension and his return. He said he's going to return, but how are we to act in the meantime? right? Which applies to us because we're still waiting for his return, right? So
Yeah.
everything that's in the Gospel of Luke, we should be looking how it applies to us. And so I looked at the parable of the sower, and there's three types of ground that Jesus talks about here. And he mentions the seed that falls amongst the and interrupt me anytime you want to ask a question, please, because I don't want to.
Sure.
So there's the seed that falls on the ground, and in the original parable, he says the bird comes and eats it and takes it away. He says so the person won't believe. There's the seed that falls on the rock, that it starts to grow with joy, but all of a sudden when temptation comes, it wilts because it doesn't have deep roots. Then there's the seed that falls among the thorns. It gets choked out because of the riches, the cares, and the anxiety of the world. And then there's that one that falls on the good ground, the good soil, with patient endurance. It holds fast to the word, and eventually it bears fruit. Oh, I forgot. The one that falls among the thorns, it starts to bear fruit, but it brings no fruit to maturity.
Yeah.
And I say these are the various stages of what I say is the church. Okay. And I call them, and I have separate names for them because it then says this is the condition of one's heart determines how one hears, and how one hears determines how one grows. Right. And so I call the one that falls on the detached heart is the first one that falls on the hard soil because it's detached from spiritual reality. The disillusioned heart is the seed that falls on the rock and then starts to grow, has a whole lot of joy, but then when temptation comes, it falls away. So it's disillusioned. The one that falls on the amongst the thorns is the distracted heart. Start out well, but they get distracted by riches, by cares, and anxiety. And then, of course, the devoted heart is that it falls on the ground and begins to take root and brings forth all kinds of fruit. And once I go through that, I actually go through the text and talk about various people that represent those different types of heart. Okay, so like Joseph of Arimathea, he does at the end where he comes and gets Jesus' body and he buries him a proper burial. Well, it says in Luke that he didn't agree, even though he's one of the leaders, one of the Pharisees, he didn't agree with their attempt to want to kill Jesus. And so, but he's not afraid to then go to Pilate and ask for his body so he can bury him. So this is somebody who the text tells us was looking forward to the kingdom. And so there's various others, Judas would be one. I think I placed him maybe two different places he could be with the the distracted heart, because he gets distracted with the money he's going to get from selling out Jesus. And there's just various people throughout, and I try and put them in various categories. And then I say, but I start out saying that unfortunately the church, especially the Black church, so this is aimed at the Black church, but it could be used for any church. And in actuality, I put a little footnote by Black church, and I say there's really no such thing as a Black church. There's just the church. There's just the body of Christ. Right. But because of our social situation here, we have to sometimes talk the lingo of the world and say, okay, people say there's a Black church, and most Black Christians end up voting a particular way.
Yeah.
So in chapter 1, I kind of set it up as to why I'm doing this. Chapter 2, I talk about the various voices that are speaking to the church, and we can go through that. I'll give you a chance to get in here now. So otherwise I'll talk the whole time.
With the African American community, the Black community, the Black church, and you're trying to get this message out, right? Just from my experience and the short time I've been into this political game here and trying to get people to get involved, and I know you're trying to use the gospel and stuff, right, to pull your community. It's hard. I mean, it's hard. And I imagine it's even harder from what you're trying to do. And then I would talk to other people, like, and I met you and talk about you. And then I got some people in your community. Oh, yeah, no, he's like you said, Uncle Tom. It's like, how do you overcome these obstacles? It's hard enough living in my community to get anybody to do anything from our side. And it's got to be twice as hard for what you're trying to accomplish. I mean, do you think that's a fair statement, or?
Yeah, I mean, so you walked me right into one of the books I was gonna mention. So in the second chapter, I list some of the books, or some of the voices that are speaking into the Black church that I think the Black church shouldn't be listening. I don't think any church should be listening to the secular society tell it what it should and shouldn't be doing. Right?
Agreed.
We're supposed to get our marching orders from the Bible, from the biblical text itself, not from what other people. So one of the books that I talk about is called Steadfast Democrats, and it's a number of Democrats who do this study to try and figure out how the Democrat Party is able to hang on to the Black vote for as long as it has, and for as much, over 90% sometimes.
And being as destructive to the community as they are at the same time. Sorry. Go ahead.
Well, they won't necessarily say that because they're Democrats doing it, but they understand. So they have a chart in their book, and I forget where they get the information from. They mention it, but it escapes my mind at the moment. But if you look at the chart, almost everything on there was like 70% or above. So when it comes to the Second Amendment, most Blacks are for the Second Amendment. When it comes to affirmative action, most Blacks are not for affirmative action. When it comes to welfare, they think people should work.
Yeah.
I mean, it's amazing. You just go down the aisle and they're right with us on all these issues. And the question is, how do they continue to keep Black people voting a particular way? And they come up with this fancy term called racialized social constraint, which is a fancy way of saying peer pressure.
Yeah.
Before white people were getting canceled, Black people were being canceled. Because if you stray off the plantation, if you will, you will be ostracized. You won't be invited to the party. You won't. If you're working in a predominantly Black company, you won't be You won't get the promotion. You won't get. The places where Black people felt safe before safe became a mamby-pamby kind of thing.
Yeah.
Where you wanted to hang out, at a Black church, HBCU. There's a such thing as Black Twitter, and I never heard about that until this year. And other Black spaces where people feel welcome without noticing that somebody's Black or white or whatever. Just feeling at ease, right? You weren't invited to those spots, and so to keep that. And you guys already said it. You're even ostracized by your own family, right?
Yeah.
So it keeps people in line. So you better not go outside the lines, because everybody is singing from the same sheet of music, from Black radio to even the church now. They're talking as though, even now with the Charlie Kirk thing, you got a lot of Black pastors saying that Charlie Kirk was a racist, and they'll pull stuff out of context, and then they'll start attacking those Blacks who said that Charlie Kirk wasn't a racist. They'll call conservative Nazis and all kinds of stuff, and they really don't understand. First of all, they'll use the word fascist. I just challenge somebody saying, you really don't know what fascism is, really, and you really don't know what conservatism is, because there's no way in the world you could say. And I just wrote an article saying that conservatism is not fascism. It's just not. Conservatives are for smaller government, where fascism is for more government control. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense. And they keep saying that fascism is right wing, and it's not. I mean, I don't know how they get away with that. But what right wing people are to the right are actually for less government control, less centralized government, while people on the left are for more government. So it puts Nazis, it puts fascists, it puts socialists, and puts communists on the same side.
Yeah, well, I can answer part of your question there on fascism, because prior to World War II, the left was writing these articles glorifying fascism. There's an article I pulled from the New Yorker. I've used it a few times on my show, where they're at the time like lamenting, if only we had a fascist government like Italy and Germany, then FDR could do what he needed to pull our country out of the Great Depression. That there was a totally. And then following World War II, now it's totally misconstrued as the reality. Fascista Fascism comes from an Italian term that meant a bundle of sticks, meaning all of us together we're stronger, whereas one of us can be broken. So it's used like in unions. Excuse me.
Right.
But now there's this total misconception about what it is. It doesn't have any meaning now. It just means you're opposing one of our ideas, and we don't have an argument that's adequate to combat what you're saying. So we're just going to call you a Nazi or a fascist because we know most other people don't understand what Nazism, National Socialism, or fascism actually are.
Right. Yeah. And they use that's part of one of the rules for radicals. You just keep throwing, hurtling insults, and eventually they'll stick. And eventually people will equate conservatism with fascism and Nazism, even though they're the actual ones are the fascists.
They control the purpose. So they get to reinforce it every day over and over and over again. So it makes it easier for them.
Yeah. You hear it ad nauseum, and then it must be true.
We're talking about what you're saying earlier. 35 years ago I got in trouble. I'm sure I went to jail and stuff. I had a black friend when I was in Lincoln Correctional, and this is in the 80s, in the mid 80s, and he was very, very articulate, and they made fun of him, because he was very articulate, and the rest of the guys, made fun of him thank God he was a big guy too, but he was just really, very articulate, and they would make fun of him because he was articulate.
He talked white.
Yeah, and it's like I would sit back and watch it. I'm like, what the heck, It was like he was the outcast because he was the only one that talked that way in our. And I think part of that makes it harder for the kids as they grow up and stuff, right? And it goes back to the environment that they're in, right? And then it becomes cliquish, right? It becomes very cliquish, very much so. Like the kids now, like from when we were younger, and you ask about how many were gay, LGBTQ, which nobody even talked about it then. Now I think like 18% of the kids think they're bisexual now, which is because of the peer pressure. It's about the clique. It's the ridiculous brainwashing by the left, which is
it's cool. It's cool now to be to come out as trans or whatever.
A pansexual left-handed leprechaun.
Yeah.
When my kids started freshman year at Downers Grove, the principal had their pronouns. This is they just graduated. This is before they even started, and I'm like, what the hell, man? This guy's putting this on there. I get kind of chastised him. Like, what are you doing this for? And then he had like a little link next to it, so you could click down onto what the different pronouns are in his email. And then as I'm reading this garbage, they say the kids you could change your gender by the day, by what you feel. How do you teach that stuff to children? How do you allow to have people that are in charge of our children, and is going to tell the kids that you could change your gender daily if you so choose? I mean, it's ridiculous. They all these people should be kicked out on their asses, but then we're demonized for simply saying just teach our kids.
Yeah, be honest.
But see that goes against the whole mantra that we had before from the LGBT community.
LGBT. Yeah.
Because they want to say we're born this way, right? And we can't change. Now you're saying you can change from day to day. So what is it? Can you change or can you not change? I don't understand. So, they're having problems with the transgender stuff now. And what does it mean to be queer? I have no clue what it means to really be queer. I mean,
problem.
It means
whatever they want it to mean.
Yeah, queer used to be somebody is strange, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah.
This person is queer, but it had nothing to do with sexuality. But now all of a sudden it has something to do with sexuality. But anyway, I think you asked me, what was the question you asked me, Terry? It was about
trying to get people in your community to support you, and it's hard.
And about being called names and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So I mean, for me, because I'm faith-based driven, it's something that either they'll listen or they won't. I don't have control over who will listen to me, right? All I know is that I'm supposed to say something, right? And challenge, and I can challenge the church like other people cannot, because not only am I an ordained pastor, but all my degrees, all 4 of them are in biblical studies. So if you want to talk scripture, we can talk scripture. You can come off the top of your head, but what I'm going to do is take you back to the text. And so, what does the text actually say? You don't get to make it up as you go. So, there is a context, and it's written for a particular reason. And when Genesis says He made a male and female, and the fact that everyone is created in the image of God. So it says that every person has worth. So we're not running around saying we hate gay people. Not at all, because that gay person is made in the image of God. Anybody of any ethnicity, and by the way, we are only one race, which is the human race. You may be different ethnicity, different tongues, but we're one race, and we all bleed red blood, right? And so we all got that in common. So it's just getting people to understand. So that's why most of my stuff is toward the church. I can't speak to those outside the church. They're not going to understand what I'm talking about. What I'm trying to do is more like discipleship, if you will. This is what the text says. This is how we're to live. Luke chapter 6 has what they call the Sermon on the Plain, and it talks about grace. It talks about mercy. It talks about taking the log out of your own eye before you start trying to take the speck out of somebody else's eye. And we don't see any of this, even in the church itself. We don't extend grace to people. We're just as bad as the world. We want to, those folks who are in the church talking about how much of a racist and stuff Charlie Kirk was. First of all, judging him as if they know what it's about. They probably haven't watched anything.
Don't even know anything.
And then acting as though he deserved to be shot. I mean, I can't understand.
It's disgusting. Yeah. I mean, we don't celebrate on here when some prominent figure on the left passes away. And generally, I'll try to give them condolences. Now, I might, I'll be honest. I may make a joke further down the line about somebody, but again, it's certainly not going to be like celebrating their death or anything like that. It is sick, ghoulish behavior, especially right after it happens, because at the end of the day, no matter what, at least they had a family or somebody else loved them. They were important to somebody. Even if I thought they were a horrible, destructive force politically, they still had family. They still had people that care about them, and I don't want to make what they're going through even worse by dancing on somebody's grave. But the fact, I think that's what was so bad about the response to Charlie Kirk's death, is just seeing the number of people that were willing to do that, and the number that were out there saying, well, who's next? We got Charlie Kirk. Now do we move on to Glenn Beck? Who's our next target? It's just so sick and disgusting. It's just even people on the left, just turn them upside down too.
So we're over our time. Doc, do you have any closing statements or anything that you'd like to announce before we shut down?
Well, when it comes to the book is available on Amazon.
And I'll tweet a link out for it here after the show.
It's available on Amazon, a hardback, softback cover, and even a digital. We've got the audio book that we're working on. Hopefully that'll be ready in a couple of weeks, and that'll then be out there. You can also get it on Apple Books and Google Books, Kobo, which I never heard of until recently. So it's out there. Please buy a copy, and once you read it, if you enjoy it, write something, put some kind of review on Amazon or wherever you purchase it. And then when it comes to the documentary, you can go online and make a donation. We're trying to raise about $200,000 to finish it out, to get it done. We've got to travel around, so the cost is more about going around to try to get those interviews. And then once we have it, then, taking all those interviews, like we had 7 hours worth of interviews just with the few that we did. So we're still looking at trying to get some like Bodie Bacham and some others, interview them and get them on. And then to talk about this from marriage, from, what it looked like during slavery and after slavery, post-slavery. And then once Moynihan wrote his report, when it was 24 I think it's 24.6%, something like that, out of wedlock births to where it is now. And then how do we turn that around? It does no good for us just to criticize it. The question is, how do we now turn it around? What do we do that's different? Because we have to do something. Because I hear even, and I can't think, it was George Frazier, Dr. George Frazier, who's not a conservative, even talking about how it's a threat to the Black community, because he said most communities are strong because they have families. They have strong families. And it's that strong family structure that even helps build wealth. And he was saying we don't have it and we're in trouble. And I agree with him 100%. But our society is in trouble because some of these same people are some of the ones who are going into Walmarts and others and walking out with stuff. They're hitting people in the head in the streets. And, you know, it's not just Black people, but there are an awful lot of them are Black. And I want to call out our church. It's because the churches aren't doing what they're supposed to be doing. It's parents, fathers aren't being fathers to their children. And I'm not just saying be a father, have a baby, and leave that baby and visit every now and then. No, you need to marry. You need to become a good husband to the mother of your child.
Yeah.
It's
So
exactly everything Kirk said this week. You hear over and over again. What was important to him, same stuff.
Yeah.
Same stuff, different messenger.
Yeah.
but same.
Well, thank you. We could talk another time about the Republican Party's big tent. When I first met you, I'm like, where's all the Republicans? Where are you guys at? Remember? I was like, what the heck? That's a different show.
Yeah.
But thank you very much for coming on, Doc. Appreciate it.
Hey, thank you.
Yeah, thanks for being here. To our audience, please like, share, and subscribe. Help us to grow so we can bring more people the news the mainstream media doesn't want you to hear. And we'll be back on Thursday with even more.